So I actually didn't get my realist. So I started that in, I want to say that would have been 2016, 2017, about somewhere in there. And I had no interest in getting my real estate license. Zero. The only reason I got my real estate license over the time that I had been working for this developer, my roles and responsibilities had evolved, and the owner had trusted me with more, which was a beautiful thing. He's an amazing guy. Um, Russ Hames, if you see this, you're the man. um, and yeah, uh, uh, we were managing a property that we had once owned. We had sold it to another investor, and he had talked. He's also another agent. He's an agent, does very very well. And he talked to me one day. And he goes, "Hey Mike, how come you don't have your real estate license?" And at the time, I had been facilitating a lot of the transactions on behalf of the company I was working for, this owner. And so I never really felt like I needed it. He compensated me fairly and well for my efforts, and gave me that opportunity. So I was like, "Oh, this is great. I don't have to get a license. This is perfect." And he said, "Yeah, but you could make referral commissions." And I said, "Huh." And it threw me back because there were a number of agents that I just referred business to. Um, and I was always wondering why they were so nice. Dinners, hey, come out to the games, let's do this, let's do that, and would pay for it. And I felt, kind of like, hey, why are you so nice, right? Well, that would be why. So I immediately then decided to sign up. I signed up for Freedom Trail Realty, which is an online-based real estate academy, or for your licensure here in Massachusetts. Completed those 40-hour requirements. It was kind of a hybrid. You had some recorded classes, and then you had classes that were live that you had to attend, and you just kept schedule, and completed it, and got my certificate. And then scheduled my exam. That was in 2019, so I scheduled my exam for 2020, because you have 2 years with that for that certificate before it expires, and then you got to retake the class. So I did get my license. There was a little bit of a hiccup, so it's kind of funny how I met Lewis. Um, so obviously I scheduled my exam. It was for March of 2020, and then, as we all know, COVID happened. So the world essentially stopped. Everybody's hair was on fire. Initially, they had thought things would open up in about 3 to 6 months. That didn't happen either. And so for much of 2020, all state licensures were sort of halted, and you couldn't test for any of them. So now, fast forward, we're in like 2021 now, and they've started accepting people back in class to take the in class test. But it was a long wait list, limited seats because of the spacing requirements at that time, and obviously the hysteria. And so they also had opened up the online testing at that time. So once they opened up the online testing, I said, "Oh, great! I'll just take it online, take it at home. It's perfect." And then their software didn't work. So then my certification technically lapsed because I was past that 2 year point. I was very upset. And I was not happy with the service, obviously, with the proctoring company that was responsible for sort of delegating all this information. And I had called up another broker in the area, and I said, "Hey, what do I do here?" He said, "Look, you can definitely appeal it, but chances are you're going to have to take this class again. It's going to be a long process. They're overloaded. It's going to take forever. You might as well just bite the bullet, take the class again. I know a guy. He's phenomenal. You'll love him. You know, champion real estate academy." And so I said, "You know what? Fine, I'll do it." So I think I signed on, actually, Lewis, to your class. Maybe I missed the first class or two. I don't remember exactly. But my friend was 100% correct. Phenomenal class. He kept it really engaging. Having already had a background in real estate and had done some transactions, along with having gone through the 40-hour requirement already, it was amazing to see that the little details and differences in your class versus what I had already experienced. And it gave me a little bit more insight in terms of what are the nuts and bolts, of what people looking to attain their real estate license really need. And I feel like your class hit all those notes. Anyone I would recommend looking to, and this is not a sponsored, paid for, although dinner will be nice. I'm just kidding. But no, really, I mean, if you're looking to pursue your real estate class, I mean, look up his reviews, have a conversation with him. Really, honestly, as a guy who's come from a different world into this world and has done it both ways, like you're covered in this class. Um, I feel like what stood out the most in your class was the engagement piece. Um, Not intimidating. If people come in there with reservations and fears, it's before they even realize it. I feel like they've opened up in the class. They start asking questions, and so that piece of it makes studying for the exam and preparing for the exam so much easier, because once the fear factor is gone, you're like, oh, this is just ABCD, right? It's another test. We take it. If we don't pass it, we look at what we struggled with on the exam. Let's be conscious and let's redo it, right? Reset. And I think that that piece really stood out to me. So I got my license, and it was pretty. The turnaround to start, getting into a brokerage was pretty quick. Um, I started at Lamakia Realty and was onboarded there, and the people there are great. I think the systems there are awesome. Um, I think for brand new agents looking for a brokerage. Um, where they're very system oriented as already as people. You've got your little sticky notes, your to-dos, on your mirror, on your fridge, where have you. You've got everything down sort of to a T. I think that La Macchia here in Worcester, I mean, they've got other locations, but I think that they're fabulous. There's a lot of support there in terms of making your when you finally do get a real estate transaction, whether it's as a seller's agent or as a buyer's agent. They've got a lot of systems and tools there for sure, um, to help sort of facilitate that process. Um, but yeah, I signed on there first, and spent some time there before I switched over to EXP. What ultimately made me decide to go to EXP? Honestly, how do I say this? Hmm. I got the sense before signing on that it was important for me to have people that I knew could hold my hand along the way if I needed it. And so that really was the decision maker for me. I know Lewis, obviously you're pretty much the reason I switched over, and not because you sold me on it, but because I got the sense from the time I'd met you in that class to all of our conversations after that point, up and even when I was at Lamakia. I mean, even when I was there, you said, "Hey, knock it out of the park. Do great. If you need a hand, call me." Right? It was never a competition or an issue. It wasn't like, oh, well, you chose them, so figure it out, right? Which is not uncommon in our industry to see that sort of behavior take place. It is what it is. It's a part of it. I think it's the onus is on the agent to understand how to sort of handle that process and handle those interactions. And I felt like you've handled it every step of the way great. Um, Despite my experience in real estate, being a real estate agent is in of itself its own world. There are definitely certain processes and mechanics that you need to be familiar with if you want to see some progress and success here in this space, right? And so ultimately, when I decided to switch, it's perfect timing because I had been waiting on you anyway, and I hadn't heard anything. So I was like, all right, well, I don't want to keep paying for fees, and I'm not really closing any deals right now. I'm kind of focused on certain career path options I have in front of me right now, and so I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna like, give it up. Just suspend my time at La Macchia, and they were very pleasant with me. Spoke to me. There was no hard feelings. Really, like I said, great. I can't speak enough about that team. Um, but I'd realized that if I ever have an aspiration of attaining my broker's license, I need to be have continuous sort of history and activity with a brokerage. And so doing that, I felt like I just shot myself in the foot. I'm like, oh my God, come on. You call that day and say, hey, how have you been? Right? Wanted to circle back with you and let you know. I know we spoke a little bit about this opportunity I was looking for, and it's happening. And I said, sign me up. I'm there. What do I have to do? And so that's how I eventually, moved from Lamakia to over to EXP Realty. Well, I think my biggest challenge right now as a real estate agent is that I'm doing it part time, right? Because I work full time and I've committed myself to that. I don't do all the things at the time of the day that they would typically be done if you were a full-time real estate agent. Obviously, I'm sure all real estate agents who are performing can speak to this. It is a full-time occupation, right? Monday through Sunday, right? You're calling, you're following up on leads, you're garnering business, you're making relationships, you're connecting the dots, and it's sort of continuous. Whereas my day is sort of truncated by my full time responsibilities and obligations and commitments. Um, I think that that's the biggest challenge for me, but I've overcome that by keeping it in perspective, right? I'm in a part time capacity here. And so I look at how do I maximize my time so that I'm as efficient as possible in both worlds. I'm not going to slip on my career function or my obligations there. And I'm not going to slip on my functions here. I'm just going to parse these out, put them in two buckets, and say, okay, when it's time to do this, we're doing this. And when I stop doing this, we're doing this. And when we're doing this, we're all the way in, right? Because remember, you're losing a little bit of ground to your peers in some sense because again, if you're just starting at 5 or 6 o'clock, Monday through Friday, they're already kind of out and about doing it, right? At 9, 10, sometimes 7 for the guys that are really hungry and getting after it. So I kind of just look at it that way. So there's no pressure, I feel like. I think it's great. A little bit of pressure because I want to close these 3 deals, but anytime there was an open house opportunity, a twilight showing for those who don't know, is really just evening hours, right? 5 to 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. You'd go to a house, a listing agent has communicated with the owner has communicated with the listing agent that, yeah, if you've got buyers that want to walk through it on a Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., open it, do it, right? Again, they're motivated to obviously sell the house and they want as much traffic and exposure and offers as possible. So uh, I took all of those opportunities in addition to going out to whatever events I could. Anytime I can make an event, I go. EXP specifically has a of Zoom calls where you can sort of get linked up and plugged in with some of the leaders, in our brokerage, which I think is awesome for the newer agent. But in order to attain those 3 deals, it was a combination of my very first deal that I just got pre-approved was from an open house. And I was at that open house for what was it, like maybe 8 weeks. I was at the end of the summer. I think it came on in June, July, sometime. Beautiful house in Shrewsbury, and I'd gotten to the end of the summer, but I kept going. I think I was late one time, and I was sick, absolutely sick. Agents, do not be late to your open houses. Do not do that. Life happens. Obviously, if it does, don't freak yourself out. Just get to it and communicate to the parties that you need to communicate to. But I did all of those open houses almost. Well, in the beginning it was two a week, Saturdays and Sundays, 11 to 1, for all of most of the summer, and then we started tapering down to one day, and I just made sure I was there, and I made sure I did it, and I treated every single person, whether they were guided by a real estate agent or not. I treated them with the same level of professionalism, and courtesy, and built that connection and built that rapport. Um, so that's how I got my first one, which is awesome. The other two are referral based. So going back sort of to that networking piece, I think a lot of times, I don't know if I can answer this, but I think a lot of times agents think like they've got to play the part. And in some ways you do. In some ways you do. You know, you've got to look the part, you've got to play the part, but try to keep it simple. You have a coffee shop that you go to, I'm sure, every day, right? You've got your favorite pizza place, your favorite burger place, your favorite restaurant, your favorite shack, shake shop, whatever, you know, that you go to. Um, where do you get your hair done? Who's your barber? Who's your stylist, right? Talk to those people. Have a relationship, especially if you're starting out early. And if you haven't already, chances are you already have formed those relationships. Tap into them. They're considered your within your sphere, right? And within your circle. So these next two were actually referrals from those sources, right? And that's just because for me, obviously, you guys could probably tell with the gesticulation I got going on over here that I'm, you know, I'm a bubbly guy. I've got a lot of energy, and knowing how to parlay that into forming relationships that otherwise maybe to the naked eye wouldn't be there is very, very important. You know, real estate, you're in the business of trust. And when people trust you, they'll go with you every time. That's the most important piece, I think. Why should they work with me? Oh, you hit me with the hammer. Why should they work with me? You're gonna get an honest guy in this space, right? You're gonna get somebody who's gonna say it to you in your best interest. Um, I think our industry, unfortunately, there are agents and people who have taken advantage, right? And it happens everywhere. But when somebody's making in America probably the largest purchase they're going to make in their life, that being a home, you have to. It's sacred. You have to think long term, right? You never want to sully a relationship for a quick deal today. It's just not worth it. And so people say that. That's been said. I'm not the first to have ever said that, right? But it happens frequently, all the time, right? Especially when this is your primary income source. It takes a little while for deals to close naturally because of the lending process. Most people aren't buying a $700,000 home cash, right? So you just have to be smart and be able to keep yourself honest. You keep yourself honest and you operate with integrity, it's gonna come every time. I mean, just literally do not worry about that. It's gonna come. Set yourself up with a network you need to support yourself until you get to that point, and then just business with integrity. People will trust you. They'll come to you every time. Me personally, something that I think has worked very, very well, and why people choose to work with me or clients choose to work with me is because I give out a lot of free information. Things that someone has told them that they are willing to educate them on, but it's going to be this price. I've given to them for free, right? Because at the end of the day, whether they do a deal with me or not, I believe that within our communities, we should want to empower and arm people with information so that they make good, sound decisions. When they don't, it just leads to a lot of aggravation and pain and which way is up and down. There's just no need for it. And so it's lended itself well for me because well, they come to me. They'll ask questions. They'll say, "Hey, we want to hire you," right? And when I hear those words, I take them very seriously. Right? I like to think that I'm a give first guy, and I feel like anyone that I've come across, I try to tell them, be that way. When you've learned something, the first thing you should think about is how you employ it, how you deploy that information that you've just learned, and how do you integrate it within your being so that it's natural in your day to day life, right? And that's something that I've learned to do very, very well. I think that you got to take your lumps and bruises when you have them, when it happens. I've already experienced it already within the short time I've had my license, and it sucks, but you kind of grow and you adapt, right? It doesn't need to kill you. It just makes you a little stronger, right? Get a little wiser, and you don't make those mistakes again, right? For me, bumps and bruises, you got to go in with your eyes open, okay? In this industry, because is as much integrity and as much thought as you deploy within practices, not just what you're legally required to do, but all the extra things. Um, it doesn't mean that others are operating that same likeness, right? And so I had an experience where I had gone to bat for a buyer, and we had a working relationship prior, and so I was thrilled when I had the opportunity to help him find his home and start that process. And I worked late. I jumped through hoops. I got creative with some of the lending options that I was aware of and that were presented to me, and I then presented them to him. And so after a couple of months of this process of looking, of getting him pre-approved and getting over that hurdle, because that was a challenge he was having, was getting pre-approved based off of a couple of things going on with his application at that time. I was disheartened when he had been working with another agent sort of all along. Um, and we looked at a couple of homes, we went through the numbers. And so to have that happen and sort of felt taken advantage of, because I, obviously wasn't compensated. If you're, especially when you're a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, you're not paid until it closes. Once it closes, then you're in. That's why they say, no roses till it closes. And so you have to go in with your eyes wide open. Um, that happened to me because I didn't have the right documents in place to protect myself and my time from that occurring without compensation, right? And you kind of just got to dust yourself off and take it as a learning lesson. You don't want to get bitter, because that's the downward spiral into the seven rings of hell, or whatever they call it. Don't get spiteful. Just get smarter, right? Say, I made a mistake here, and if I hadn't done this here, I could have protected myself here. Because things like this are going to happen, right? Especially if you're in this industry long enough, you're gonna come across it. Knowing how to deal with it is going to be your saving grace, and partnering yourself with the right brokerage and the right team, that mentor, that person who's been doing this for 5, 10, or 15 years, or 1 year, but have had ultra success. You want to tap into those things, surround yourself with those people, or surround yourself by those people, and make sure that you've got your ducks in a row, because it's gonna happen. But that's okay when it does. Now that I have my license and I've been in the business, would I do it again? Yes. I would do it again, and honestly, I would say do it right away. I'm not going to make this same mistake. I shouldn't call it a mistake, but when it comes time for me to get my broker's license, whether I plan to start a brokerage that year or not, I'm going to go jump on it and get it. The earlier you get in this business, the better. The less life sort of gets in the way, the less other commitments and obligations that you create. You can kind of get in it and take your time learning it. Um, when you get in it a little bit later, you can still take your time and pace yourself, because you're only going to learn and retain by however you learn and retain information. Um, but you're either going to have to do it quicker than usual, depending on what your goals are and what you're looking to achieve, or you're going to need a longer runway, right? Being more time. So I would say, yes, I'd do it again. I'd do it again. I'd do it earlier, and I'd be crushing it. like I'm trying to now. Yeah. How do you contact me if you're looking to work with me? Michael Murray, 857-266-0230 is my number. Michael.Murray at exprealty.com. See you soon.